What happens when a dream is born in laughter, not applause? What happens when the world sees imitation, but destiny sees something more? Under the blinding lights of America's Got Talent, a man stood alone. Not famous. Not rich. Not even expected. His name was Mateo Cruz, a Filipino street performer who grew up singing Elvis Presley songs on broken sidewalks and crowded jeepney stops. He was gentle by nature, quiet, and deeply devoted to his craft. Music was never his hobby. It was his survival. Beside his journey, though unseen on that stage, stood Rosa Cruz, his mother. A laundry worker with tired hands and endless faith. She was resilient, prayerful, and unbreakable in belief. She had watched her son sing through hunger, rejection, and long nights when hope felt thinner than air. There was also Daniel Reyes, Mateo's childhood friend. Bold, protective, and endlessly loyal. He believed in Mateo even when belief felt foolish. He had seen talent where others saw mimicry. The audience that night did not see sacrifice. They saw resemblance. They saw a man dressed like Elvis. They saw confidence that didn't belong where it stood. They saw something easy to doubt. In the crowd, whispers rose like static. Curiosity mixed with quiet amusement. Judgment formed before a single note could change the room. No one asked how far Mateo had traveled to reach that stage. No one asked how many times he had been laughed off small platforms before standing on a global one. No one asked how many nights his mother had prayed for one chance, just one, that might change everything. The stage felt enormous. The silence felt heavier than sound. This was not just an audition. It was a collision between expectation and truth. Would this be another moment where dreams are politely dismissed? Would talent be overshadowed by doubt before it even had a voice? Or would something unexpected rise from the echoes of an old legend and remind the world that greatness often arrives wearing borrowed clothes? In that suspended moment, before music, before judgment, the room held its breath. Because sometimes, the loudest transformations begin in silence. And sometimes, the ones they mock are the ones who leave the deepest mark. Mateo Cruz did not wake up each day dreaming of a spotlight. He woke up thinking about survival. He lived in a narrow home tucked between concrete walls in a crowded Manila neighborhood. The kind of place where sunlight struggled to enter and noise never slept. Mateo was in his early 30s, lean from years of missed meals, with eyes that carried both gentleness and quiet determination. He spoke little, smiled rarely, and listened more than he talked. Music was the only place where his heart spoke freely. Every morning, Mateo cleaned his worn shoes with careful hands, as if respect could be polished back into them. He practiced his singing softly so the neighbors would not complain. His voice, though powerful, was always restrained. Years of being told to stay small had trained him well. He worked odd jobs when he could. Carrying boxes. Fixing broken fans. Helping vendors set up stalls before sunrise. The money was never enough, but it kept his mother fed. That mattered more than comfort. At night, Mateo transformed. He stood in front of a cracked mirror, adjusting an old jacket that once belonged to a second-hand shop mannequin. He studied Elvis Presley not to copy him, but to understand him. The posture. The breath. The emotion behind every note. Elvis had been larger than life, but Mateo searched for the human beneath the legend. He sang on street corners and small gatherings. Sometimes people stopped. More often, they laughed. Some recorded him, not to remember, but to mock. He pretended not to notice, but every laugh settled quietly inside him. Mateo never argued. Never defended himself. He carried his hurt the way he carried his guitar, close, heavy, and alone. Still, there was something unbreakable in him. Not confidence. Not pride. Faith. He believed that if he sang honestly enough, someone, somewhere, would feel it. His mother's tired smile was proof enough that music could heal something real. Now, standing on the biggest stage of his life, Mateo felt smaller than ever. His hands trembled slightly. His chest felt tight. Doubt pressed in from every side. But beneath the fear lived a familiar truth. He had nothing left to lose. Mateo's greatest struggle was never poverty. It was invisibility. For most of his life, he had existed in the background of other people's stories. Another worker passing by. Another singer filling the air and disappearing with it. No matter how deeply he sang, the world seemed to hear only an echo, never the heart behind it. The comparison followed him everywhere. Elvis this. Elvis that. People did not listen to Mateo. They measured him. They pointed out what he was not. Not original enough. Not American enough. Not worthy of being taken seriously. Every compliment came with a condition. Every chance came with a joke. Over time, the laughter carved something hollow inside him. There were nights when Mateo questioned himself in silence. Was his dream borrowed? Was his voice just an imitation wearing borrowed courage? He remembered moments he had walked away from small stages because the shame had burned deeper than hunger. Moments when he had thought about selling his guitar for food and never singing again. The hardest part was what it did to his mother. Rosa never complained, but Mateo saw it in her slow steps and aching hands. He saw how she pretended not to hear neighbors mock her son. He felt guilt heavier than any failure. He was afraid that chasing this dream had cost her peace. Loneliness became his closest companion. Friends moved on. Lives advanced. Mateo stayed behind, repeating the same songs, the same streets, the same doubts. The world demanded proof before belief, but belief was all he had left. When the invitation to America's Got Talent arrived, it did not feel like a victory. It felt like a final test. This was the stage that could change everything, or confirm every fear he had ever buried. Standing there now, he felt the weight of every past rejection pressing against his chest. If he failed here, it would not just be another loss. It would be the end of a lifetime of hope. The silence around him was crueler than laughter. Because silence meant judgment had already begun. Mateo realized then that this performance was no longer about success. It was about survival, of his dream, his dignity, and the quiet promise he had made to himself not to disappear without being heard. The moment arrived without warning. Mateo stood under the lights, and something inside him finally let go. Not fear. Not doubt. The need to prove anything at all. For the first time in his life, he stopped trying to be seen correctly. He allowed himself to be seen honestly. As the music began, the weight on his chest loosened. The stage no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a memory. Like the quiet nights in Manila when the world slept and only his voice remained awake. He remembered why he had started singing in the first place. Not for approval. Not for escape. But because music had once saved him. His voice rose, not loud, but full. It carried years of rejection, hunger, and patience. It carried the sound of streets, prayers, and worn-out hope. There was no imitation in that moment. No performance. Only truth. Something shifted in the room. The audience leaned forward without realizing it. The earlier amusement faded, replaced by attention that felt different. The kind that listens instead of waits. The kind that forgets comparison. Mateo felt it before he saw it. The silence was no longer heavy. It was alive. He realized then that Elvis had never been the destination. Elvis had been the doorway. A way in. But what stood on that stage was not a copy of a legend. It was a man shaped by struggle, carrying a voice the world had never heard before. The unexpected truth settled deep inside him. He did not need to escape his past to be accepted. He needed to carry it forward. With every note, Mateo stopped apologizing for who he was. His trembling hand steadied. His breath grew confident. The fear that had followed him for years finally loosened its grip. This was no longer an audition. It was a declaration. In that moment, Mateo understood something that changed him forever. Even if the world rejected him again, he had already won something far greater. He had claimed his own voice. And once that happened, there was no going back. The world often decides who we are before we ever get the chance to speak. It measures dreams by appearance, talent by familiarity, and worth by how closely we resemble something already loved. Mateo Cruz's journey reminds us how dangerous that habit can be. For years, he carried the weight of comparison like a quiet punishment. Not because he lacked talent, but because people refused to look beyond the surface. They saw a costume before they saw courage. They heard an accent before they heard pain. And in doing so, they almost missed a voice shaped by resilience. But the night America's Got Talent fell silent, something deeper was revealed. True power does not come from originality alone. It comes from honesty. From standing fully inside who you are, even when the world misunderstands you. Mateo did not abandon his inspiration. He honored it, while finally allowing his own story to breathe. And that is the lesson we forget too easily. You do not have to erase where you came from to move forward. You do not have to sound like everyone else to matter. You do not have to be accepted first to believe in yourself. Sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is stay soft in a hard world. To keep showing up after rejection. To keep offering something sincere when laughter would be easier. Mateo's victory was not in applause or approval. It was in self-acceptance. In realizing that being inspired does not make you small. It makes you human. Somewhere right now, someone is being mocked for trying. For dreaming too loudly. For believing in something that feels impossible. This story is for them. Because the same world that laughs today may fall silent tomorrow. And when it does, it will not be because you became someone else. It will be because you finally allowed yourself to be fully heard.